This is Real Learning with Real People. These conversations are with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. With minimum amounts of editing and maximum authenticity, we hope to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning that's based on their life experiences. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and other guests have been chosen because they have meaningful lessons to teach, and I want to make sure they have the platform to share them with the world. The language in these videos is sometimes mature, as I'm always encouraging guests to just be themselves. This is all part of making sure that we do our best to give you content that is both authentic and effective, and that you truly feel like you can utilize the real learning and connect with these real people. Today's guest is a former U.S. Army infantry captain with service in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. He's served over 19 years in law enforcement, working everything from narco-trafficking to human smuggling to counter-terrorism. He also holds a bachelor's degree in law enforcement, a master's of forensic science, and a doctorate in strategic strategy, as well as being a certified fraud examiner. His name is Dr. Jason Piccolo. Jason is the host of acclaimed podcast The Protectors, author of bestseller Unwavering, A Border Agent's Journey from Hunter to Hunted, and well known as a whistleblower regarding migrant children's protection in America. Jason is a man who I have an unquantifiable amount of respect for because of his bravery when facing enemies of multiple origins, including within his own government. In addition, he's humble and hungry to learn, which really makes him a great guest for our show. He makes me feel truly safe, literally because he's so well equipped to keep me safe based on his training, but also in the conversation. He's the expert here, but really gives me space to ask questions and learn, and that's why I believe this episode can be so impactful for so many. Here's our talk with true lifelong learner, Dr. Jason Piccolo. Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Where in the world are you right now?
I'm about 15 minutes outside of DC, so I'm in Virginia.
Oh, nice.
The grand old United States of America.
And I love talking to Americans because they always plug it all the way down to some cool superlative about the country, which is if you talk to a Canadian or people, I've had a couple Aussies on, and it's just kind of like, I'm from Australia.
Yeah. And that's what, like, most things is like, yeah, I'm from Australia. And it's like, well, people in the States it's so big that they just kind of forget where you're at. They're like, well, United States, but where?
Yeah. And I joked with you right before we came on just about, I don't know what to call you because your titles are broad and I can't imagine there's too many people with the combination of titles that you've achieved in the world, period.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a different background than most people, I guess, being military and law enforcement, and then just getting a bunch of education here and there. So Jason is the best title. Actually, Dad is the best title.
Oh, nice.
But Jason is my, just Jason.
Cool. And if you're fine with sharing, what's your family look like?
I have a wife, 2 kids, 9. Oh, actually, they're 10 and 11 now. My son will be 12 soon. My daughter just turned 10. So,
cool.
Yeah, man, it's what they used to call the nuclear family.
Yeah. And we were kind of talking. You said you've told your story a lot, and you can get through it pretty quick now. And in the intro, I talk about your writing and the many other things that you've done, and this will be probably the longest intro in the history of my show, that's for sure. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, maybe the biggest reason, is because you are a learner through and through, and we're going to dive pretty deep into that. But from me looking in from the outside, it's been important to you to learn and grow and get better for a long time, whether you necessarily identified that way or not. But to start, what I want to hear a little bit about, in as much or as little detail as you're comfortable sharing, is what your family life was like growing up. What was growing up like? Siblings, mom, dad, that kind of thing.
Sure. I had 2 brothers, 2 older brothers, regular family up until I was about 14 or 15. Then there was a lot of issues, at least when it came to my parents and their marital strain. I ended up moving out for a bit when I was 15, and then out for good when I was 17, or a little bit before 17. Not the greatest childhood. I was don't know if you want to call that street smart, but I was more of a practical learner back then. And then later on, after I moved out, I became very religious and just kind of try to keep my head on straight. My childhood was, other than that, it was basically normal. Friends, played some sports, hung out with all types of people, that kind of stuff.
Cool. And I asked the same question to everybody, and if you don't want to answer, or if it's too maybe complex a question, because it has been for a couple people, then feel free to say so. But if you had to describe mom in a word, what would that be?
Mom?
Yeah.
Like MOM, Mike, Oscar, Mike, and nurturing and caring. Or
Cool.
that's
Okay.
2 words, nurturing.
Okay. And what about dad?
Stern. Not me as the dad, but my dad.
Yeah. And so you talked about, and in following you on social media and stuff like that, you're proudly religious, and you talk about that pretty openly everywhere. And I myself am not, and I've spoken about that on here. And did you alluded to the fact that maybe that was able to send you in a certain direction. Was there any specific learning that you pulled from finding religion or diving deeper into religion that helped you?
See, I've always had a religious base, but I wouldn't say I'm very deeply religious. I'm the kind of guy that's got the Bible for dummies. I'd like to think I believe in a higher being. I'm not an atheist.
Gotcha.
I believe in right and wrong. That's kind of what brought me to the directions I've gone. Primarily, life is just really looking at, okay, there's a bad person, there's a good person, and there's people in the middle. I'd rather be the person that's on a good side.
Wow. Very, very concise. You can tell you might have spoken about that before. That's a very, very good way to put that. When you talk about bad people and good people, that is a very different meaning to you than it would to me, just by your depth and breadth of experience that you have.
True.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say there's true evil out there. Did I know that growing up? No. Was I very open to listening to a lot of different people, or maybe people who were didn't have my best interests at heart? I probably wouldn't think twice if they were thinking anything evil about me, as far as predators. But later on in life, after the military, the first time, I did go to war later on, but in between, I was in law enforcement. But I didn't see true evil until I got into law enforcement over 20 years ago. And before that, I kind of figured, even the worst person has something good about them. But sometimes there truly are just some evil people out there. They don't have any moral compass. Can they be reformed? I don't know. I'm sure there have been instances. What do you do with people like that? I have no idea. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a jailer. I'm not anything like that. But yes, there are evil people out there. But then there are truly good people that are trying to do the right thing all the time. And can the evil people take care of them, or not take care of them, but take advantage of them? Yes. The thing is to find out where you fit into this whole variable. And to this day, that's one of the reasons they're going to see a lot of different titles, is I still need to learn, and I need to figure out where I can make the most impact.
Oh, man,
kind of long-winded, but
no, it's not at all. I was just gonna say, I wish I had more free time so this could go on for 3 or 4 hours, because or that I had the ability to come meet up for a coffee or something now. But
well, I tell you, I appreciate your patience, because I do have a full-time job still. Even I'm working at home, but I'm still trying to do like you are. I'm trying to record as many episodes as my nighttime show, and then I have a podcast on the side.
Yeah.
And still write a book. So I'm always like, I feel so bad, because I'm always like, I'm trying not to flake out, but I've learned not to get exhausted, because once I get exhausted, I can't speak freely like I am now. I end up kind of holding back too much.
Yeah, I've been there when I'm trying to record, like at the beginning when I was trying to record like 2 or 3 of these a day, and just that.
You can't.
Yeah. So when you speak about being a learner, that I mentioned it to you before, that I think was maybe thrust upon you early. Like you said, you were street smart, and so I'm going to guess you had to figure out that learning was important by the circumstances that you were under.
Learning is different than just a book, and you have to learn about life. And after I always envisioned myself as a kid becoming a police officer, becoming a soldier, one of those types of things. It was always one of those like, I've been described as an empath, so I always figured I'd find a path that would give me the most opportunity to kind of like absorb people's bad feelings. I think that's what the empath does. And as a soldier, as a policeman, or as anybody in law enforcement, emergency responders, or the like, is you always want to give back. You always want to help others. So that's kind of what my goal of learning has always been, is what can I learn that's going to help me to help other people? And no, it's not one of these like, oh, I'm the best person. You have to love me because I want to help other people. But hey, you know what? I have the time and I have the energy. Why not? Why not take what I've learned and give to other people? Growing up, like we were talking about before, my childhood wasn't the most pristine nuclear family. Joining the military did put a kick in my butt and put me on the right path. That's why later on I continued to, I became a commissioned officer, and I just started getting education as far as like book education and certifications and everything else I could, just because I want to learn as much as I can.
Right. And that brings up a question for me that maybe you've been asked it before, but do you think that you were a learner, and because of that, you were able to better handle the evil that you experienced throughout your career and through your life? Or was it the experience of being around some of that evil that you mentioned before that pushed you towards a learner mindset, I guess?
I guess I don't know, man. I've always just been kind of this way, whether it's like, when I was a kid, I used to read everything I could. And if you looked at my library card back in the day, back when I was in the teens, you probably would have committed me, because you probably would have thought I was going to be like a school shooter or something, because every book I could possibly find on counter-terrorism or military knowledge or anything, I would just absorb those books and read as much as possible. And I guess I've always just been trying to just keep reading and keep learning, and another really, the evil kind of gives me more of a focus. Like now, my next goal is I'm writing a book on trafficking, human trafficking, but domestic, i.e., like United States trafficking, because my whole career a lot of it's been international based. And now I'm looking at domestic trafficking, and not to make a profit, because to me, I've made a dime off any of my books. It's just, I like writing. But if I could write an awesome book on trafficking, domestic trafficking, that people will read and learn about the problem, and maybe even make it a supplemental textbook or something that they can help understand what I've seen and what other people have seen, so they can make logical decisions to then, in return, defeat the problem. You're never going to completely defeat it, but you could try. I mean,
Yeah.
And if a book can do that and the words can do that, why not?
Totally. How familiar are you with growth mindset as a concept?
What do you mean?
Just like Carol Dweck's work or any of the base? No?
No. Let's hear it.
That's crazy, because you are it essentially. But Dr. Dweck she wrote a book called Mindset. I couldn't even tell you how long ago it's become a foundational thing in my world of coaching and teaching and professional education development, that sort of thing. And it's used commonly by NFL teams and MLB teams and stuff like that. And it essentially separates people's mindset into either growth or fixed mindset. Growth being something that's more oriented to learning and a curiosity approach and that kind of thing, and fixed being the opposite. And you have that growth mindset, and it's awesome to talk to somebody who's never heard of it but has it, because everybody thinks that you have to learn it. by like learn it as a concept itself.
Yeah.
But really what you're essentially approaching with your trafficking book that you're working on now is like, I'm going to give it a shot. Like that's a growth mindset right there. That's what she did a ton of research on like hundreds of thousands of people, and you just captured it in what you're talking about in your book on trafficking, which is that I don't, hopefully somebody uses it and it starts making people make change.
Yeah. And I use a very complex, I pull this up every time I talk to anybody about my writing and my decision-making process is I use mind maps.
Yep.
Even as simple as, I'll put trafficking in the middle and then I'll just flip it around.
Yeah.
Because it has to be more than generic. Nobody wants it. There's so much generic information out there. And I find that social media has dumbed it down a lot. Twitter's 240 characters unless you link it to something else. Most videos, 5-6 minutes. TikTok's got us down to about a minute, 15 seconds. There's a lot of people want quick information, but I think sometimes, like a book like Trafficking, I think you need to go deep into it rather than there's a pimp, he's got a girl, or there's a trafficker, he's got a girl, a boy, a little kid, or whatever. There's more to it than that. What is the psychosocial means of why do these children get victimized? Why are Johns, Joes, or whatever are out there victimizing these little kids, paying for them? Why are they doing that? How can we stop them? Is it through penalization where we put them in jail? Is it through other types of, do we shame them in public? I mean, how do you defeat the problem rather than just saying there's an A, there's a B, there's a C? Because there's way more in between than just going from A to B to C.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, to me, and I guess probably to you, it's the problem is so complex that like when I can't even imagine trying to gain an understanding of it in a YouTube video or any like a Sparks Notes, or not that there's anything wrong with Sparks Notes, but I used it to get a couple degrees, but that kind of thing. And I wonder so you approach and you have approached complex problems like that for a long time now, and in different ways and on different scales. And to me, looking at your work and doing a deep dive on the things you've accomplished and the things you've done, I see somebody with an abundance of good confidence and a willingness to go against the grain, to say the least. And when people are listening to this or watching this and they do a deep dive into your stuff, some of the whistleblowing stuff and I can't even, it's almost too big for me to list it all on here. Calling you somebody who goes against the grain is not doing you justice. Is that something that you picked up along the way, or is that just something you had?
I think it's something I had. I've always been that way of, and going against the grain is different. You see, I think a lot of problems can be solved at the ground level. And I think what happens is, so in being in the government or being in the military for, damn near 30 years now, I see things differently. I've been at the ground level. I've been at the senior levels. But I know the ground truth, the truth of the matter, a lot of the times is happening at the ground. But when you're at the ground, you may have a grain of what's going on. So you have your grain over here, someone else in a different agency or someone else doing something different has that one over here. It's all mixed up. But unless you bring all of them together, you're not going to understand the full grasp of the situation. And what happens is that one person over here, one person over here, one person in the middle send up their grain of information to their chain of command or the people that manage them or leader or whatever. And these leaders who have a 30,000 foot view or managers or whatever don't have a granular look at the full picture because they're only looking at that one piece. Now, if you take everybody on the bottom and you get the ground truth and you sit them in the room with leaderships the whole leadership spectrum, then you can solve problems. But because if you all have the same common problem, you can't defeat it by yourself. And that's where teamwork and leadership come in. So you have to look at everything rather than just a 30,000 foot view and the ground truth. You need to bring everybody together and find out what's going on.
Okay, now you're getting into some stuff that I can actually kind of relate to, just in the sense as like I mentioned before, as a university basketball coach, this is something that I'm still well on the path of learning how to be good at what I do, but and we all are. But one of the things that I've really picked up is that there's listening to your captains, there's listening to no one as the leader, there's listening to every single person and starting to disseminate that information. But when you're that person at the top, that I love that concept of the 30,000 foot view, that gets almost impossible to actually lead the people that you need to lead adequately, much less successfully. And
if you read my book, and you mentioned before about being a whistleblower, the reason I blew the whistle is because I'm a common sense person, and there was a serious problem that could be fixed using common sense. And trying to get people to do the right thing is sometimes a very complex situation. You know, a lot of people at that 30,000 foot view think more about careers and livelihood, even though they don't have to. They could do the right thing and still maintain that, but maybe they won't maintain that same luxuries that they had before. And you'll find a lot of times people blow the whistle for reasons just like that. They see something that's wrong. They know it can be fixed. They know it's right. We already have the policies out there. But then there's no action and lives can be put at stake. So everything I've done in my life has been kind of, I'll give you my leadership philosophy thing here in a minute, but it's just because I felt like I had to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to pick up a good amount of my miniature dachshund barking in the background here for whatever reason.
That's why I keep this mic right here, and if you're looking, I have a little switch. I can mute myself because my dogs go crazy, so no problems with that. Welcome to the world of podcasting.
Oh, well, the luxury part is that it's real learning with real people. So it's not edited, produced, deeply learning with people. So
that's what I do now, completely raw. That's why I like going live. I'm like, hey, we're live.
Yeah, no, that's cool stuff. And I don't want to skim, like I said before, I don't want to skim over any aspect of your story, but it's just impossible to do the deep dive that we want to in this. So when you talk about,
well, how about I come back on again later on?
Yeah, no.
Today
absolutely.
We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about whatever.
Yeah, I'd love to come on yours too. I'll
talk
to a bunch of people about coaching basketball and teaching and living in the Great White North. But when we start to scratch the surface of a whistleblowing situation, and not everybody who listens to this, especially people who don't pay attention to a lot of the climate in and around this issue in America now and in the past, I've got a decent understanding of it, and I've paid attention to many of these situations because it's always been a personal interest of mine. But it has at least from where I sit, a negative connotation.
Yep, I was just going to say that. I've been called a snitch, all sorts of crap, and I don't care, man. You know, it is what it is.
Like sorry to interrupt, but like, what the heck is that? Like, look at what you whistle blew. Like, how is it? Like, I just.
Well, just okay for the audience. I'll give my 2 minute of how it kind of goes.
Yeah.
So the southwest border of the United States, Mexico, United States. What happened is in 2015, I was part of what they call this human smuggling cell, part of the White House. And what our goal was to stop, disrupt, and dismantle smuggling organizations, smuggling little children, families, and everything up from Central and South America. The actual organizations, that's what we're supposed to go after. What happened was, starting in about 2013, 2012, influx of unaccompanied alien children. These are little kids, anywhere from babies on up, were transported from wherever their first location was up to the southwest border of the United States. When you come to the southwest border, you could either do one of two things. You can get across the border, a porous border area where there's a border patrol agent, which is a uniformed guy in a green uniform. You see him all the time. Or you can come to a port of entry, which is an officer, Customs and Border Protection officer. What would happen is the children would be taken into custody by one of these officers. They'd be handed over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where they were in process, and then they would be handed over to another agency, which was Health and Human Services. And this is all big. Just imagine this goes from one agency to another, and now you have 80,000 plus kids in custody of the United States government. Now, there's simply not enough resources to keep that many kids in custody. So what they do is they release them to a sponsor. That means an adult that would come forward. And a lot of what I found out was, I found out that the government was releasing a lot of these kids, a high percentage of them, to these sponsors who were non-familial, meaning they're not family members. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them were criminals. And I said, hey, you know what? It's kind of bullshit. Excuse my French.
No, it's fine.
Why aren't we, and at this time, I'm 16 years into my law enforcement career. I've already done a tour in Iraq as an officer with the military. I kind of had my head on my shoulders, I think. And I said, hey, why don't we just go do an operation and get these kids back, at least the ones that we know were released to criminals. Right. And the policy, let me backtrack. The policy was that these sponsors were supposed to be vetted, i.e. criminal history checks done, fingerprints, everything. It simply wasn't happening. That's a story for another thing. My whistleblowing actually changed that process, which was good. But to go forward, I said, why don't we do an operation, go get these kids back, and then we'll figure out what to do after that. And it just simply fell on deaf ears. And I had to go forward and blow the whistle. So, I mean, hey, it's just one of those things. I mean, I think anybody in my same situation with the same background as I did would have done the same thing.
Yeah, and I think, to me, it feels like my hair's standing up. To me, when you describe your situation, it feels like you're not doing yourself justice. But then I try and imagine what verbiage would do a situation like that justice, and it just doesn't exist, at least in my opinion. But I do want to clarify, when you say that they're, just in case anybody happens to hear this show and not want to read your book. Like, I don't really understand how that would happen, but when you say they're being released to criminals, like, these were not like people who'd had like a theft charge, or people who'd had a minor assault charge or anything.
No, there was up to and including sex offenses, and I think there was one homicide. And this was just a small snapshot too. It was 29,000 sponsors were vetted through this list I saw, and 3,400 had criminal histories. Now we're talking, there was probably an aggregate of, from 2013 to the time I blew the whistle, over almost close to 200,000 migrant children that came across. So who knows how many kids were released as sponsors.
Yeah, that's, again, it's just, like I said, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, kind of thing, for a variety of reasons. I'd like to use that, though, to pull the learning and the growth concept out of it that I believe is, I called it going against the grain. I agree with what you said, that it's much, much more than that in terms of what that actually was. But it's not like you blew the whistle thinking, well, everybody's going to think I'm a hero and nobody's going to have a problem with this. I'm not going to get called a single negative name, that kind of thing. And so if we go into the overarching concept of having tough conversations, doing things that are going to be unpopular, and that kind of thing that everybody is faced with sooner or later, what would be your best advice on coming face to face with that situation on a much smaller scale, but with the same concepts that you probably had to entail in that?
Well, it's tough. It's tough telling people not to do the right thing, but you have to understand, if you blow the whistle, your life will be changed if you get found out.
Mm-hmm.
But um, there are ways to become an anonymous whistleblower, and I highly recommend that, unless you really, really, really need to tell them who you are, or you feel a need to. Remain anonymous as much as possible. The message will still get out there. I was anonymous, but if you read my book, you'll figure out that the government kind of rooted out who I was, just because of these things like education and stuff like that. It's great to learn a lot of things and get a lot of certifications, but when there's only one of you that has all those certifications, it's easy to figure out who you are. Yeah. For instance, I said I am a certified fraud examiner, and I was the only certified fraud examiner on that task force of 13 plus people. But the problem was, when I was getting debriefed, quote unquote, anonymously, I mentioned that I was a CFE, so it's very easy.
Gotcha. And so if I were to put it the same scenario, but on a smaller scale in a conversation, like, maybe I'm not blowing the whistle even at a corporate level, but I'm more just trying to have a conversation that's going to make me unpopular, or make a decision that's going to make me unpopular. Say, we'll use me as an example, coaching a basketball team at the university level. I decide I'm going to release a kid who's a good kid on the team in terms of athletically, performance-wise. We see it all the time in sport. Doesn't fit our culture. It's going to be an unpopular decision with the public. It's going to be a popular decision with the administration. It's going to be a unpopular decision with fans, what have you. What is the thing that I should lean on for me personally in order to find some strength to make a decision like that and go for it in spite of those things, in your opinion?
Everybody's different. And not everything you do is going to be the popular decision. But it's tough, man. I'm telling you, my government career was shot. I'll never go past the grade I am now. So you have to understand that whatever decision you do make, there will be consequences, whether they're positive or negative. The best thing to do is try to find someone that's going to champion your cause as well, and try to do it as a team level. Try to get backers behind you. When I blew the whistle, I did it. I said, I just did it. I mean, I knew there would be consequences, but hey, you know what? I had enough background and stuff that I knew I'll get by. But if you're early in your career and you have to do something like you're saying, release a kid or do whatever, you have to think about, what is that going to do to them, and what is it going to do to you? And is there somewhere in the middle you could find a balanced area? That makes any sense.
Yeah, that's the stuff right there. That's where, and you just looped yourself all the way back to being an empath, and why that, because a non-empath would definitely have probably taken a harder stance there, and maybe gone as far as to say you have to think about what's best for them and what's best for you. But I think that empath side that you really connected with, and I think it's a valuable part of leadership, is like, maybe there is a middle ground. Have you really dug deep trying to find that? I'd like to learn a little bit more, because you probably have the most badass doctorate title in the history of doctorates. And I'm not just trying to boost you. Like, I'm not just trying to have 40 minutes here of kind of telling you how cool you are, but you're pretty cool. And you're having a doctorate of strategic strategy is something that, like, I literally have no idea what it necessarily means, but I know I want you to tell me about it for like a day. So
I had two options, because I had to do it remote. One was a PhD in criminal justice, and one was a doctorate in strategic security. Now, strategic security is mostly counter-terrorism and stuff like that. And criminal justice, I already felt like I knew enough about that to get by in my life. But one thing is, when I deployed, I was attached to a special operations command in Iraq, and I was their anti-terrorism officer. So I kind of got a good grasp of terrorism. Now, if you think about my growing up, I always wanted to. I read every book you could possibly on every 70s and early 80s counter-terrorism or terrorist organization. When I got back from the war, I actually went to work for a task force with the military as a civilian law enforcement agent, investigating the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, like Al Qaeda and stuff like that. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm really interested in counterterrorism. Why don't I get a degree that interests me? If I'm going to be writing a lot of information, let me do that. And at the time, I didn't plan on being a professor. If I did, maybe I would have got the PhD instead.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been teaching college for a few years now. And either way, a doctorate's a doctorate to me. It's just great to do it.
Yeah. And that brings up a thought for me, which is, are you familiar with Tony Blauer?
Yeah, Tony. I've had him on the show a couple times. I love him.
Yeah. So
he's coming on next week too.
Yeah, cool. Well, I just had him on, just recorded with him last week, and I was introduced to his stuff and his concepts through the CrossFit side, because I happened to be at a gym at the time where the owner used to fight in the UFC. His name's Jason McDonald. He used to be Jason the Athlete McDonald when he was in the UFC, and Tony, as you know, has a lot of stuff on fear and how to respond to it. I'd love to know what your relationship with fear is, if that's not too broad a question.
No, it's fear is different to different people. You know, I hate going up to doors in law enforcement capacity because you never know if anybody's just going to shoot through the door. But me, my biggest fear now is anything happening to my kids. You know, I think I can handle myself in most situations, but my biggest fear is not being able to control the unknown. So, I mean, that's the not being able to control the unknown is my biggest fear. You can give me a gun. I could use any gun. You could put me in a fight. Hey, let's do it. But anything happens to my kids, I'm absolutely fearful of that.
Yeah. And that I think that perspective of how your relationship with fear really changes, because I would imagine if you're able to go back to before, when you were younger, before having a family, before having kids, what did fear look like to you then?
So in a border patrol, I would do a lot of humping around mountains, i.e. like climbing all over the place looking for aliens that are coming in from Mexico. Some of them are just here looking for economic relief. But there are some bad people coming across, criminals, stuff like that. My biggest fear back then was ambush. And then later in life, you understand that ambushes can come from anywhere. And, you know, and you could bring that all the way up to when they found out I was a whistleblower. It was an ambush, essentially. Everything comes up to being an ambush. So ambushes are a bit fearful. And that could be anything. That comes up to me knocking on a door as a law enforcement guy. You don't know if anybody behind that door has an AK-47 or anything else that's going to penetrate walls, doors, or anything and go through me and go through my light body armor. Yeah, so ambush is a fear.
Well, I think that shift from that to now is important to understand too, and how it's developed. I have, as I think a lot of people can agree, I have a friend who is a mom, and her concept of fear is and really worry and stress and that kind of stuff. She said she's just gotten to a point where does it affect your four walls? She's like, I've been scared of a lot of stuff. I'm worried about a lot of stuff, but I've now gotten to a point where it's just like, does it hurt your four walls? Does it affect your four walls? Period. Nothing else. And I guess many people get there eventually through one path or another, but understanding how it's evolved from where it was is important. And again, being familiar with Tony's stuff, you understand the difference between having no fear, N-O, and knowing fear, K-N-O-W. And do you have a best advice on fear management in the moment as opposed to trying to get rid of fear?
In the moment, mental preparation. See, anticipation is one. So now we're in we're in weird times, especially with the pandemic. But what can you anticipate is going to happen in the future? You don't. But can you prepare for it? Yes. But the other thing too is mental preparation. I used to always mentally prepare. Like before I went to bed, I would close my eyes and I'd picture out, okay, if someone broke through that door right now, what would I do? And at the time, I didn't have kids. There was a gun in my mattress, a shotgun underneath my bed. Because this is back when I used to work narco operations. And I was in San Diego. I never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'd visualize this every night. Okay, in my mind, I could picture my guns right there. This is there. This is there. What am I going to do next? And one night, I was going to court for a big cocaine load. It was like 40-something pounds. And there was a lot of dirty people involved with it. And my back door bursts open and the alarm goes off. I immediately drop to the ground, grab my pistol. I hand a shotgun to my wife. And then I end up, because my wife was in the military and later on in law enforcement, but I ended up clearing the house because in my mind, I visually prepared for that. So it didn't hit me because I knew exactly where everything was at. I knew the layout of my house. Ended up just being the wind blowing open my door. But yeah, man, it's just, you have to visually prepare and you have to anticipate the weird, the unknown. 2 months before we had the pandemic, I looked on the news and I saw China and I saw that everybody was wearing masks. So I ordered a couple boxes of N95s. We've since donated them to the local fire department because they don't have any. Mm-hmm. But it's just anticipation. Just kind of keep your eye open, see what's going on, and say, hey, you know what? You live in a neighborhood. You know everybody in that neighborhood. You see a car that doesn't look right or comes down. You're anticipating what's going to happen next. Are they here just to sell something or deliver pizza? Or are they here to do something else? Try to anticipate. And mental preparedness actually does work. Absolutely believe that.
Oh yeah, Well, and being into the sports psych side and the performance psychology side, we talk a lot about that on the show, and I didn't want to go into that too far today with you, just because there's so much that I think we could probably talk about if we start going deep into performance psychology.
Well, let's talk about something performance wise, because this is going to throw some people for a loop. Visual acuity. Okay. Playing video games.
Yeah.
I still play video games, not a ton, but when I first got in the border, I was playing a lot of like Call of Duty type games. Mm-hmm. So your eyes are always scanning across the screen, right? You're always scanning. In law enforcement, a lot of times what happens is when you get a dynamic operation, you get tunnel vision and you can only focus on one thing. And now I'll give you a quick story here. We were following a load of methamphetamine coming from the border, and we were in a convoy. We're doing surveillance. They didn't know we were behind them. There was 2 minivans, and they pulled down to a dead end road. We had a helicopter up. The helicopter said they're bailing because all of a sudden there are like a bunch of government cars behind them. So I jump out and I start pointing out where all the people are hiding, where they're running to, and clearing the van. Then we go up and we clear the house. And one of the guys afterward goes, "How did you do that?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "How did you point out everywhere where everybody was at and you're still going and clearing everything else?" And it has to do with playing so many video games at the time. Because, at the time I was like, younger and I had no kids. So at night, you play video games or whatever. But you learn visual acuity. And that is such a key thing when it comes to being able to have situational awareness, being able to see around you. Because I don't know if you play any video games, even if it's any type of video game or anything, you're always looking around. If you're playing sports, you're playing basketball, you're looking for that pass, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're not just looking at that one person, you're looking all around. It's visual acuity. It helps so much when it comes to performance.
Totally. And we're in it now. So when you talk visual acuity, I'm sure I took this from somewhere, but I truly don't remember who or what I took it from. But we often talk with our athletes, and I talk with people I work with here at the Boost Institute about the difference and the importance of understanding having a wide field of vision, but a narrow focus, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a pretty narrow mental focus in order to accomplish a task, but a wide literal field of vision to be able to see as much as possible. We teach a lot of the physiological side to get yourself there. So we teach a lot of the breathing. We teach a lot of preparatory stuff in order to get to that point when it comes to actually performing in a moment. Do you have any physiological tools that you use to get that wider field of vision in those moments? Because, or maybe you don't use them as much anymore, but you might have used them earlier on.
I tell everybody one thing right now: hydrate.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this, you saw me hold up my mug.
Yeah.
I hydrate all the time. And a lot of times you're going to find out when you have adrenaline spikes. And I talked a little bit about this with Tony and everything, but back when I used to do dynamic operations, when you're ready to go, your body starts burning. And I'd always have to go to the bathroom all the time, like go pee all the time.
Yeah.
urinate.
Yeah.
And the one way you can't really prepare for that, but physiological, you always have to prepare that. You might have to do some like things really quick, and you might have to deal with the unexpected, which is having to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And or be hungry. It's different in law enforcement and everything, because sometimes you could be on an operation for hours and hours and hours, and your body's not used to being without fuel. So you have to be fueled up, and that's where hydration comes in. That's where having the proper fuel inside you, not just sugar, not just carbs that are going to burn off quick, but have something that's going to sustain you while you're going through whatever you're going. What if that game goes into overtime? Well, if you're used to just sustaining enough energy to get through the first, 2, 3, 4 quarters, what happens when you go into overtime? Prepare for it. And keep something handy nearby, because your body needs fuel. And mentally, if you get dehydrated, the first thing is going to go is it's going to be your focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I guess the base concept, or the simplest way to explain it would be around your brain, your spinal cord, your nervous system, everything. So we're talking reaction time, agility, strength, balance, recall of short-term memory, long-term memory, all that kind of stuff. It's all happening in an electrical circuit. And what's the best conductor that we're aware of, or at least one of the best increases in conduction tools is liquid or water. So it's cool to hear that same perspective from a side. We've had multiple people on the show talk about the importance of that kind of in the sport specific or the education specific side, but we have yet to have somebody really draw from it in terms of needing to be able to perform in the moment. Not to mention the fact that you might not be able to get it for a while, which we're many of us are fortunate enough to just be able to access it whenever we want. So, how much time do you have?
I'm here for a little while.
Okay. I kind of want to circle back, because now we've kind of touched on so many things that my eyes keep going back to this point in my notes. 2 older brothers. What has that done to get you to the point you're at now?
Let me tell you something about 2 older brothers. 2 older brothers that were boxers. One was diamond gloves, one was golden gloves. I don't know if you guys have them up in Canada, but they're really good boxers. One was an absolute machine, could run 12, 15 miles up mountains, crazy. The other one's a brawler. But they would always smack me in the side of the head or in the arm, always hit me in the arm. So to this day, 30, 40 years later, I'm 47 for the audience, is even my kids, they come to smack me, I'm like, my hand goes up and I smack it away. And I automatically go to give a smack back. I don't hit the kids, but I'm just like, But to this day, having 2 brothers, it still affects me to this day. And, it's good to have brothers, man.
Yeah.
And sisters, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and we've done some deep dives with different people on what the differences are in growing up. When every time we talk, that's why I ask the family questions. It's always interesting to connect back and people generally like talking about their families for one reason or another. Either the situation wasn't that great, and they're able to have some perspective now and look back and see what came from that, or it was really great. They like to reminisce, or there's some mix in there, and a blend of awesome and lesser so. When you talked, so I'm interested in a lot of the stuff that you post, that you talk about online, especially on your show, about weapons, particularly guns, because it is something that, like, in Canada, we don't have, not only do we not have the ability, but it's a totally different culture, right? Like it's just not something that is a part of our lives on the regular. It's not that nobody has them, but there's just so many more restrictions. Why is that? Why is that a passion for you? Besides the fact that you've been around them at such a high volume, I guess. But what is that? What does that mean to you?
See, after the war, I wasn't really into guns much anymore. I got back into 2006. But then years later, I got into more of, I got really good at, like, drawing and firing. And that's kind of where it comes from me. It's not about killing people and shooting people and war and all that stuff. It's like a competition to me. I love shooting and getting better at every type of weapon system out there. And I just like the mechanics of it. Being around guns for, and in my family, I'm the only one that's been in the military and only one that's been in law enforcement. Only one that really shoots guns or does anything like that. But I look at guns different. It's almost like they're works of art as far as their operations. And if you ever shoot a crappy gun, the bullet doesn't go straight or whatever based on functionality or whatever. I mean, there's always something about it that doesn't just feel right. But when I shoot a really good gun that I take care of, and I'm better than someone else at, that's the only competition that part of me you'll probably find. That's what I enjoy about it.
Are you competitive?
When it comes to guns and stuff, yeah.
What about anything else?
Not really, no.
Are you competitive internally? Do you push yourself to beat yourself?
Oh yeah, I always have to have options, and right now that's why you'll see me do a lot of different shows. I have a podcast. I'm writing books. I'm always doing something. I have to succeed. When I wrote my book, I was teaching 5 classes. I was working full time. I mean, I had a million things. Now I'm learning how to not compete with my internal part of me that says, okay, you got to go, go, go. That's why I've had to push this podcast off like 3 times already, because I found out that if I do it, I'm going to be exhausted, and it's just going to turn out like crap.
Yeah, and that is something that I think it's one of the things. There's a self-care movement that's happening now, and it's super important across multiple domains. And it's cool to hear you talk about learning that importance, I guess. I'm going to ask you a perceptively ridiculous question, but it's because I want to hear the follow-up potential out of it. Are you a proud American? Like, are you, do you, like, I know all Americans are proud, but are you, like, do you take a high level of pride in being American?
Yes, but not, I'm not a proud government person. Okay. I'm a proud American. And I mean, you see like a million different flags behind me, because a lot of the times it's the people that hold up those flags that I'm proud of.
See, I knew you would answer that. Cool. Where does that come from? When I ask you, and I saw on your face when I first asked the question, you're kind of like, you're right, that is kind of a ridiculous question, but I wanted to hear your answer, and I want to hear about what those people are to you. When I say Jason Piccolo, Dr. Jason Piccolo, former special agent, or any of the other titles, he's a proud American, and you think of the people. What is that?
Yeah, well, it's I've never been a big fan of those who just want power for power. If you look at someone like a Washington, or you look at someone who's like in it for the right reasons, and granted, he wasn't the most perfect man in the world, but the people below him followed him for a reason. They wanted freedom, and freedom is not. Right now, we're having a tough time with freedom throughout the whole world, and specifically, the types of freedom that Americans enjoy have been quite limited lately. And one thing that really, really bothers me is giving up freedoms in the face of fear. That doesn't, to me, scream out proud American or America in general. So what does scream out to me is everybody fighting, bonding, or some other means together for a common good cause. And those good cause are, your unalienable rights, like life, liberty, prosperity, civil rights. Think about it that way. You have millions and millions of people back in the 1960s getting together for a common cause in face of tyranny. And that tyranny was different. It could be a singular tyranny, as in a racism or a racist or some other form of tyranny, but they all bonded together. That is what I think of. I think of World War II. We're getting a bunch of soldiers together, but it wasn't just those going over to fight. It was those there on a home front. Now, yes, there were, one thing that's always bothered me was war profiteers. And you've seen that in the World War IIs, World War I. I'm absolutely positive it happened in every single war, was people trying to profit off of fear, off of war, off of whatever. You're seeing it now when the first thing that happened was all the masks sold out. All the toilet paper sold out because people were war profiteering. Mm-hmm. Did I feel bad that I bought 2 boxes of masks 3 months before this happened? I did. That's why we gave them away. Yeah. But there's ones out there right now you're seeing profiteering. But it's those people that look at it and say, hey, you know what? Oh, we're going to bond together and do the right thing. That is what a proud American to me is.
Yeah, and I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that, because I kind of had a feeling that you would answer somewhat like that, and I'm what I was hoping to do was that I would be able to bring a bit of a message to anybody who has negative stereotype, because I have a lot of American friends, especially being involved in basketball and now doing this business and stuff like that. It's been really cool, and one of the things that I've heard far too much is that the title of proud American in circles outside of America can be misconstrued. Mm-hmm. And people attach it different ways, as is everybody's right and as it's going to happen. And that's 100% normal. But I really kind of had a feeling that proud American to you isn't, in spite of the symbol of the flag, which I'd invite you to talk about if you want, is not necessarily attached directly to a government concept. It's attached to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why if you ever listen to my shows, watch my shows or whatever, I always put the caveat in there, zero politics. I'll steer clear of politics.
Yeah.
I'll talk about religion all the time. You could be anything you want. It doesn't matter. I do have faith. Does it have anything to do with being American? No, that just has something to do with me I believe in a higher being. Is it God? I believe so. Is there alien life out there? Yes, there is. But do we know about it? I don't know, man. The truth is out there, right? You guys watch the X-Files up in Canada? Come on.
Oh, yeah. The original and the reboot.
Yep.
You're very, and I think that your career speaks for itself in this regard, but you have at least a scientific method approach to a lot of what you do, I would imagine. You have a hypothesis, you'll test a theory, you'll see the results, positive or negative or somewhere in between. You'll create a new hypothesis, you'll test a new theory, so on and so forth. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that that's been one of the reasons why you're able to pick up so much stuff from different domains.
Yeah, I like to just look at the big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's cool. It gives a very cool perspective. And I think that perspective lends itself well to things far beyond the things that you've actually worked in so far. It's something that when people listen to this or when people watch this, I'm thinking about probably about 25, 30 people as we talk who are in nothing to do with law enforcement or the military, much less those people that I know that are police officers. And I actually have a friend who just got hired as a border patrol agent in the States. But it's broad, and it's deep, and the impact is true because of that. Are you reading or watching or consuming anything right now that you would like to share, like anything that's interesting that way?
Oh geez, man. I keep 3 books going on at one time, one audiobook, one fiction, one nonfiction. And I love fiction books, man. I didn't for the longest time, but I love them now. And nonfiction, I'm still reading those counter-terrorism books. I'm reading books by Fred Burton, who's he's really good, man. You have to have him on the show. And yeah, what else do I consume? I consume a lot of Gary Vee, man, and a lot of Tony Robbins and all those guys, just because, and not all their messages, because a lot of their messages about being influencers, about being money, or whatever. I want to learn different leadership principles. That's my next thing. Is I want to, take this ground truth and strategic values and find out where can we fit that in the variable that normal people that don't have the background I do, or don't have the Tony Robbins or Gary Vee's background, but people could pick up on like little leadership things, and not just the most generic things about, oh yeah, just lead from the front or follow me or whatever.
Yeah.
But focus on the other aspects. People you lead, whether that's a coach or whatever, all have something going on in their mind right now. That's why you'll see me post every couple of weeks about mental health. Mental health isn't just being, hey, I'm feeling down, I'm depressed. Mental health is like, if you're at your peak performance, is there something mentally that's going to hold you back? What is it? And how do we get through it to where you could just focus on the task at hand?
Yeah.
And that could be anything, because, any major athlete, any major anything, soldier, whatever, always has something else going on in their life. You get them for 6 hours out of the day, whether you're a coach or a teammate or whatever. What's going on in the rest of those hours? What's affecting them? Did their dad go to the hospital? I mean, did they just have a bad day? Did they think about, whatever?
Yeah.
What's going on with them? So mental health is a huge aspect of everything.
Yeah. And I was fortunate to work with somebody. His name's Sean Swords. He's a really good basketball player, played on our national team, played with Steve Nash, that kind of thing. And his one of his many staples and standards was that the first time you see somebody who you're connected with, who's familial or a friend to you, teammate, that kind of thing, is you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, ask them how they're doing, and they might say good, but you'll know by the handshake and the look in the eye if they're lying, and if there's or if maybe you don't take the opportunity in that exact moment to try to delve a little deeper on it, but you can follow up, and you're silently communicating the ability to talk to you about it if they need somebody to connect to at some point. So I'm with you on that for sure. Have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
No.
Viktor Frankl? That would be, I think not only do I have it sitting right behind the computer here, but it's also, I didn't write it, so I'm not plugging my own book, but
I'll check it out, man.
It's a game changer. It's a game changer for sure. It takes you back to the Holocaust and survival story from that, and some really interesting stuff there. So
I'm glad you brought up the Holocaust, because so when I was an ICE officer at headquarters, I actually went to the Holocaust Museum for a special presentation they do for law enforcement. It's called Law Enforcement and the Holocaust. Lessons learned from the Holocaust. And you learn a ton about Nazi Germany and about the brown shirts and about, law enforcement people and military back then turning a blind eye or getting in behind groupthink. And I highly recommend everybody look at the Holocaust Museum and with the law enforcement lessons learned, because there's a lot of lessons learned there.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that impacted my interest in psychology in the first place was the Stanford prison study, which is not, it's obviously quite different, but it's gives you some insight into a lot of what makes people tick in situations with that groupthink and all those kind of concepts. And again, you're like, it's cool to hear you bring it up in your context, but understand how it can be detrimental in any type of performance context to have people just start thinking a certain way blindly, I guess, would be the unjust way to describe it. That's not enough detail.
I think our last topic of the day will be reactive and proactive. Now, a lot of what our government does has been reactive. A lot of what anybody does, a lot of times reactive. You're reacting to something that happened to you. Mm-hmm. Someone punches you in the face, you punch them back. You're reacting to it. But a lot of times in my career, I've tended to try to be proactive. And that comes into the decision-making process. We've had the same problems over and over and over again. But how do we proactively accomplish getting through them? When I used to work narcotics operations, we used to always just react. Okay, we get a load of dope in at the border, we'll follow it out, we'll arrest some people. And then I got put on a proactive group where we're supposed to go and look for the bad guys. How can we disrupt and dismantle these organizations? And I've used that for everything. You have to get proactive. And that gets you out of groupthink, because a lot of times the group is all reacting to the same thing. But if you're proactive, then your leadership will excel, and you're going to get a lot of people that are going to be adverse to it. And there's going to be definitely a million people adverse to it. But you're going to find out that those people are the ones that are afraid, or they've got to where they're going because they were always reactive, or always yes men. And yes men or yes girls are always reactive because they're always agreeing with whatever. They don't make their own decisions. So you have to be proactive, make your own decisions. You're going to get negative feedback. But look who you're getting that negative feedback in and where you want to be. And that's where I'm at, brother. Nice. Be proactive.
I like how that ties in a ton of what you talked about too, just that mental prep, that ability to respond to an ambush situation, whatever that ambush situation is. It's a really good way to put a bow on it. If people want to connect with you or follow you social media wise, stuff like that, what are your handles, that sort of thing?
Sure. Twitter's at Dr. Jason Piccolo. Facebook's official Jason Piccolo. Instagram, which is my favorite, is at Dr. Jason Piccolo. If you go to my website, it's Jason Piccolo, JasonPiccolo.us, not CO, US. And then where else can you find me? I don't know. I teach college here and there. I'm actually going to be teaching cybersecurity in the fall. So I do have my hands in a lot of different things, but I enjoy all of them.
Like I said, I think I could try and pull on some threads from you for a long time. So we might have to do a part 2 or part 3, but I really appreciate you being on today. And I know I don't know if you've ever done anything for the Canadian government or the Canadian military, but I still appreciate the stuff you are doing, because we're all in it together. The borders don't definitely make a difference. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. And thank you for everything you've done. And I really appreciate your time, and we'll connect again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Cool. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.